Hi, my name is Andi, and I want to go over two things with you today. One is how I got into water resources engineering and civil engineering, and then two is a little bit of advice about job work and stress and starting a new job and finding jobs and something that might help you with your own career path. So welcome, and I'm glad you're here. I get asked a lot of the same questions about where I went to school and how I got into engineering and specifically water engineering. And so I wanted to just do an overarching video to answer some of your questions. My path looks a lot different from everybody else's path. What we end up doing as far as our careers is never just one direct thing that we start doing, we'll be doing for our whole lives. In fact, I can't tell you how many times I've started something and been like, I could see myself doing this forever, and then it's totally changed within 4 or 6 months. I've got my tea. It's very hot. I don't know if you can see the steam coming off of it. No, maybe not. It tastes like sugar cookies. My undergrad is in geological engineering and my grad is in water resources civil engineering, and I have a professional license as a professional engineer to practice civil engineering. So the first question is, why did you choose water resources over any other civil engineering discipline? And the truth was, I chose groundwater long before I chose water resources. Groundwater just happened to fall in water resources. So my undergrad is actually in what's called geological engineering, and it's a discipline that is not at a whole lot of universities. It's a little bit like, I guess it's a combination between mining engineering and geotechnical soil engineering and drainage and just anything that involves subsurface and rocks. So I took a lot of classes in geology, like structural geology and geomorphology, geochemistry, but I also did some of the mining engineering classes and all of the suite of engineering classes. And then my classes that were geological engineering were things like I had a class on subsurface geological engineering, so being able to design things in the subsurface. I had a couple classes on groundwater, which is how I got into groundwater. So there's a professor who did that at the university that I went to. Just a whole wide array of things that are, I guess, kind of civil engineering, but more rock-based and more subsurface-based than, like, say, a geotech class, which is very soil-heavy. So I got into geological engineering, and that is a convoluted story of how I got there, from me wanting to be a mechanical engineer and being in robotics and STEM classes and things like that in high school, and then getting to college and realizing, like, I need some classes with more guys. I need some classes with more girls. I love guys, but I need more women in my life to be supportive and to work with and to do homework with and things like that. And I didn't always want to have to be competing against guys. I wanted to have a program where I had support network and had these inspiring female figures and people that I work with, my peers. So I really enjoyed some of the geological engineering classes, and I liked the professors, and so I just switched right over. My dad is calling me, apparently. So the decision to move into geological engineering was pretty easy for me because I liked the professors, and I talked to them, and it seemed really cool. And I was on the phone with my mom walking across campus, and I remember saying, if I didn't have all these engineers in my life growing up, I might have been like a geologist or something to do with rocks, because I really, I've always liked collecting rocks and looking at the science and stuff behind it, and I was really into volcanoes and things like that when I was in elementary school, so lots of earth-based things. So that decision was really easy, and for me, I made the decision as a freshman, though technically I was in what was considered freshman engineering, and most universities have that. You start in with freshman engineering, and And once you've gone through an engineering 101 and you've kind of gotten a sense of all the different types of engineering classes, then you declare one and you move into that department. I just kind of declared it a little bit early, and they let me do that.
How did you get your first intern?
After undergrad, or I guess in the middle of undergrad, I got an internship with Golder Associates doing more environmental engineering, but everybody who worked at Golder had they had their degrees from Rolla as well in either geological engineering or environmental civil engineering. And so they knew what the geological engineering program was, though when I was looking for jobs outside of St. Louis, there weren't a whole lot of people that really understood that I wasn't a civil engineer, but I wasn't quite a geologist either. And I wanted to be doing more of the engineering things. I didn't want to be doing the geology work, and I probably wouldn't have been qualified to do it either. So I had applied to a bunch of internships, and I didn't get any of them, and it was, summer was about to start, and I was thinking, well, I haven't gotten anything. Maybe I should sign up for some summer classes, which I've always been about, like, taking as many classes in the summer as I can, doing just always go, like, how can I get done with this degree, sooner so I can start my next degree sooner and finish sooner. And so I'm always, like, looking forward, and sometimes to the detriment of the present, and not enjoying what's happening in the present, and really just taking in and, like, feeling, I've just completed this. Look how successful I was in completing this. Instead, I'm always like, all right, that's done. What's next? So when I was at the end of my junior year and I didn't have an internship, I was mostly just trying to get through finals before I started even thinking about, well, what am I going to do with myself for the summer? And Golder had interviewed some other people that I thought they were going to be getting jobs at Golder. And at one point they emailed me and said, hey, we'd like you to come in for an interview, which is when I realized that they probably didn't think that the other people were a good fit, and they were looking for something a little bit different. And so it just kind of, like, fell on me right before the summer started. I went and I interviewed, and I was able to work. It was in St. Charles, which is maybe like a half an hour drive from my parents' place in West St. Louis. But during traffic in the summer and the afternoons, some of the times I was coming home, it was an hour and a half drive, and I would go to the gym just to kind of, like, split it up halfway, split the commute halfway. Just so I wasn't in the car for an hour and a half, and I was in this little stick shift that didn't have air conditioning, which I loved, but it was miserable to commute in. So that was my internship, doing more of the environmental engineering side of things. And I was making a lot of reports and things that were going to be sent to the EPA, but I wasn't quite convinced that anybody was ever going to read them, and I was updating them every quarter. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing the field work and then coming back in the office, and I enjoyed, like, being productive and, like, doing these engineering tasks, which they weren't design engineering. It was more like it was all groundwater remediation, so it was more checking the boxes for the regulations and making sure that, we're watching these sites and they're actually being cleaned up slowly over 50, 100-year time spans, but they are being cleaned up incrementally every quarter. But I wanted to do something that was more challenging, and so when I finished, I actually graduated undergrad a little bit early, and so I went back and I worked for Golder for a semester and the summer until graduate school would have started that next summer. And I applied to be in a water resources program so I could do more of the production and design side of groundwater stuff and not be doing any of this regulatory side. So I kind of switched gears again. I'd always thought that, if I wanted to get a job with Golder, they do stuff that is design, even though it is remediation and environmental based, but they do design. I always thought, I can get a job with Golder after grad school. And they were well networked. Golder was really well networked in some of the other offices, and they really liked me in my office. But by the time I got through doing my grad school, which was all based in groundwater and surface water interactions, and I traced, they call it isotope tracers, and so basically I traced the water cycle. When it rains, it comes in through the precipitation, it rains, and it funnels down into the groundwater. Some of that groundwater is actually becomes surface water at the lower elevations, as it just, like, crops up in a creek or a river. And I was tracking how much in this little rainforest watershed, how much of that water in the creek is from groundwater versus how much is just falling out of the sky or running down the slopes in the rainforest as just runoff into the water. And I was able to calculate the percentages of these different sources that was in the river water, which is very scientific, which to me is not engineering, because engineering, you're solving a problem. Science is like looking at it in detail, and then engineering is using that detail to find a different solution, or it's solution or productivity based to me.
Why did you not go for a PhD?
I always knew that I wanted to go back into consulting. I had thought that because I really enjoy school, that I would go and I would do my PhD and then go back into consulting. And so when I came down to the decision of, there was a project that we had at my university with my professor, and it was out in the rainforest again, and it would be doing some modeling. It was climate modeling based on transpiration rates from the like the water going through the trees, which was like really cool and very necessary. But in the end, I thought, I don't want to be in Costa Rica / College Station for the next 4 or 5 years, and knowing that I don't want to be a professor. I don't want to stay in academia. I like business way too much. So I decided that I would stop my schooling there, and it was a huge decision for me at the time. I was not convinced I was making the right decision, but I'd gotten a little bit of a taste of consulting, and I knew I wanted to go back and do some more consulting. So I packed everything up from College Station and moved back to St. Louis, and I lived with my parents for I lived with them for probably 8 or 9 months, from maybe not that long, from March through to August. And it was hard. It was very hard going back and living with your parents, not because they're hard to live with, but just because I had nothing to do with myself. I went from working 150% capacity to doing nothing all day long, and that is not my speed, as you probably know from having a YouTube and a blog and a full-time job where I've got my hands in all these different places, to just having nothing to do. And so I traveled a little bit, but then I was starting to run out of money, and so then I really had nothing to do. And my parents would come home from work and be like, well, what'd you do all day? And it was so disheartening to hear, like, well, what'd you do all day? Like, well, I did nothing. I sat around and moped. So, I tried to teach my cat how to use the human toilet. She's not a fan. So the next question is, did the classes you took in your MS program help you in the real world? Most of the classes in undergrad and grad school, you don't use them directly. It trained your brain to think about things in a certain way. It trained your brain so much that when I left engineering school, I had to actively figure out how to engage with some of those more social aspects. So, like figuring out, how do I talk to people who aren't engineers, who aren't thinking in the exact same logical path that I'm thinking in? And that training, I think, is really necessary to be able to be an engineer and to be in industry and like trying to optimize and find solutions. I think that training is necessary. The classes themselves and the math problems themselves, I almost never do. There are people that do some of it tangentially, or they use a model, and you got to know how the model is built in order to be able to tell if this model is pulling out results that are accurate or results that are ones you can trust at all. And so that is really important to be able to understand the theory and the background. But as far as busting out a differential equation, I probably could not do that. So the classes were useful, but not in a directly useful way. And my master's degree is interesting because it was a lot less math problems, a lot more modeling and using models like groundwater models and HEC-RAS or HEC-HMS I used. I don't think I ever learned HEC-RAS. So some of the GIS, I did a lot of things in ArcMap and ArcGIS. And that whole suite, which is stuff I did use in the consulting world. It's not stuff that, a lot of the stuff I learned in grad school, I did not use nearly those capabilities because I knew exactly what I needed to do in consulting, and it's creating shape files and it's making things look good so that you can export them for a report. And so there are things that I kind of knew how to do and had to do a lot of Googling when I first started to actually finish those things in GIS. But then once I had done it like 2 or 3 times, it was the only thing I ever used GIS for. That is not to say that there are people that work for my company that are GIS experts and geospatial experts, and they use the full functionality of ArcMap and ArcCatalog and all of that. I just didn't in my career, in my early career. I guess I'm still in my early career, so you know what I mean. So the modeling was useful. I don't get a chance to do a whole lot of modeling, and now that I'm not the most junior person anymore, I have less and less of an opportunity to do that modeling because now I'm at a higher billing rate, but I have entry-level modeling skills still, which is, kind of just the route I've taken. A lot of grad school is reading a paper, critically analyzing it. So the published papers are not useful to know how to read. Occasionally I pull up a published paper and I use it because we need it for some sort of like model calculation or to describe some sort of phenomenon that's happening at just this one specific site in this one specific area in Texas, and somebody wrote a paper about it. But that was more of developing your critical analyzing skills. So whereas undergrad was, how do we develop this like logical coming to conclusions sort of your brain. This is, how do I critically analyze and challenge things, sort of my brain. And I use that a lot, even though, the papers and the things I was researching, like small watershed hydrology. I mean, I do small watershed hydrology, but I couldn't tell you what the specific stuff I learned in those classes, and then I use specific theories or equations or things that I would have, gone over in those classes. I love this tea. Okay, so next question is, what do I like most about water resources? And I'm going to answer this as, what do I like most about doing what I do, which is water resources, but it's very specific things that I do within water resources. I don't do a whole lot of design because even when I am doing a design project, that's not just it's not a feasibility or preliminary study, it's not concept development, it's like pure design. Even in those projects, you do 20% design and 80% figuring out how to write it down and communicate it. And communicating with other people in different disciplines, because these days you don't just sit down and figure out how you design this water system. You have to get community input, you have to get, my clients are all very engaged and active in the projects. You have to talk with the electricals, with the mechanicals, with the all these different types of engineers. Even in water resources, I'll have to talk with the stormwater engineers or the conveyance engineers, and so it's always a lot of different people. Some of the technologists are more challenging than other technologists to work with, and so that's probably what I guess what I like most and what I like least about water resources is that it's not purely water resources. It allows you to do a lot of different things, but at the same time, it reach across these boundaries and communicate with all these different people. Is your job stressful? I like a good amount of stress. Yeah, I like some stress because it helps me focus and get things done. And if I'm not working with that end goal in mind, then I'm bored and I'm searching on the internet. Basically, the story of me being an environmental engineer is, if I'm bored, if I'm not being challenged, then I tend to have 800 other things in my mind. So I do like a little bit of stress, so it is stressful. Other people like the steadiness of the schedule, being able to work from home, working regular hours, so they choose different projects than me. They choose projects that aren't as stressful. But for me, that's kind of what gets me going, and so I love those sorts of projects. Do you think the name of the university makes a big difference? For me, I was able to get jobs that were near universities that I went to, that were hiring specifically out of my university, which I think is pretty common. So, like for me, I prioritized universities that were well known for engineering. They weren't, like an Ivy League for engineering, but they were well known, and there was a financial component of me getting scholarships, and I made it through undergrad with no debt. I made it through grad school. They paid me to go to grad school. So those are some things that factored into my decision, but it means that, if I had wanted to be in a different state or a different city, I probably should have gone to a grad school near that state or city. So it does make a big difference in if you have somewhere that you really want to go to. And I found when I was looking for jobs that it's very difficult to look for jobs and just say, hey, I'm open to relocate anywhere. And I still have that problems. Even when I'm searching within my company, which, would be able to relocate me to other offices that have projects, I'm still not really sure where I would be the best fit anywhere in the world. And it's hard to search for those opportunities without narrowing it down to a specific location. So I think that's something that will have technology help alleviate in the future, especially with a lot of the younger generation in the workplace and them being up for traveling. So I don't think the name of the university makes a big difference unless you have a specific company or a specific city that you want to work in. Like, my company, I could tell you the schools that we hire from in this region, which is different from the schools that they hire from in other regions. In Florida, we obviously hire from Florida schools. And so it really does mean that you're probably going to be working somewhere or offered a job somewhere near where you go to school. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't get offered a job from somewhere elsewhere in the country. And I have friends that went to Rolla with me, but got offered internships or jobs in other states. But I think that's more rare than getting offered a job within the state that your school is in. If they're ABET accredited, we pretty much realize that they're a good school. And some people have, they recruit harder at schools that's their alma mater. Some people have specific schools that they have relationships with to recruit, and so that kind of plays into, where people end up getting hired from. But I don't know that we try to discriminate from certain schools. I do know people that they prefer, instead of getting like a tech degree and then transferring and finishing out, that they like people that have the 4-year university degree. And I also know people that they have an undergrad in something totally different and they went back and they got their master's in engineering. So I think it's just case by case. How long did it take you to feel comfortable doing your duties at your job? So I would say that at both companies that I worked with, there was definitely a learning curve. And when I started, I was doing something that I hadn't done in a while or hadn't ever done in that program, or something that was just totally new to me. And there was a learning curve associated with that. And it's kind of one of the stressful things about starting a new job is you don't know who you can reach out to within that company. You don't have that network yet. And you're doing these new things, so your brain just has to be on and going the whole day. So that's been Advice with Andi. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, please like and subscribe and share with a friend, and I will see you next time. Bye!